Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am representing the European Liberal Forum. I'm Francesco Cappelletti, Policy and Research Officer in this Brussels-based think tank and political foundation of the European Liberal. And together with the Freedom Games, we organize this ELF Hub, which is aiming at gather experts on well, quite difficult topic to talk about these days, and to have an international dimension. But we will try to go through this very difficult title, which in Polish I cannot even read, but how to achieve energy independence of the EU, and to describe why nowadays energy is being used as geopolitical weapon. Very briefly, let me introduce the speaker of today's panel. We have Joanna Maćkowiak, which is a doctor, biologist. She has been in the Ministry of Environment in Poland, and she's an expert of energy and climate. Then we have Katarzyna Pełczyńska, sorry for my bad pronunciation, which is a sociologist. She has been in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as an ambassador of Poland to the Russian Federation. And last but not least, we have His Excellency the Ambassador of Germany in Poland, Thomas Bagger. So, as I said, it's a very complex topic because we are gathering here in a safe environment, but there is a war in Europe, the European continent, the door of Europe. And it's a war that is not only a traditional war, it's ongoing hand in hand with an energy war. Because energy is being weaponized, is used as a weapon, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine inserted this factor in their strategy. And because many member states are dependent on the import of gas and oil from Russian Federation, we are going to expect a Cold War winter this year, and with impact in industries, European industries, the prices, as we can see in our bill already, the whole market, but also for households and the production. And it's a duty for the EU to act to get rid of the dependence, the heavy dependency of Russia, not only because it represents an opportunity to stand for the Ukrainian cause, but also because we are talking about this very difficult topic in a very particular moment for the EU, where there is an ongoing sustainable transition towards a more green economy, the EU Green Deal, and the many plans that we are going towards for the 2030-2050. And I would like to start with a question to Joanna. We are redefining the concept of energy in Europe. And as I mentioned, the importance of the ongoing transition might be affected by this new situation. So redefining energy security means inserting in the discussion the new renewable sources and what is going on in eastern part of Europe. So what is going on Ukrainian soil and the consequences. Would you like to start with some insights for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I speak in Polish? Bo może tak by...
Perhaps that would be far more convenient for me. Indeed, what has happened recently in the past half a year, although the gas crisis has been going on for a year plus, because we need to understand that Putin started to manipulate gas prices a year ago and then only escalated and continued, and that is the result of overcalculation of Putin. He is detached from reality. What conclusions do we get? We hear a lot. It's all because of the climate policy, whose goal is to abandon fossil fuels. If fossil fuels are now used as weapons, well, perhaps we have been leaving them, abandoning them too slowly, or we committed some errors. Energy security has always been defined as safe supplies of energy resources from different countries. And when I've been dealing with energy and climate for 20 years almost, I noticed some time ago why I mean here progressive groups that support energy changes, why don't we participate in the discussion on energy security? If technologies change drastically, we are not fully dependent on fossil fuels, but we have new technologies, renewables, energy storage. We know far more about how to balance the energy system. What role is there for flexibility? There are prosumers generating electricity for own needs, and this traditional group dealing with energy security, state security or global security, and the world that deals with progress in energy industry and climate protection, these two worlds have never met. And we indeed have tried many times to join them. We participated in the Warsaw Security Forum debate within the climate conference in Katowice. We had discussions in Poznań. It was always difficult. And it turns out that this old definition of energy security is no longer valid. We need to change the thinking. Our future is not the excessive use of fossil fuels. Every country will be abandoning those in an optimum way with a different strategy. But the future is to provide stable supplies of electricity based on renewables that use local resources like wind and solar energy. These are the resources nobody can manipulate, so nobody can affect. Of course, there is not always when the sun doesn't always shine, and these are arguments for conservatives against renewables because they are so chimeric, but there are many countries that cope very well. Sweden, for instance, they also have hydro energy systems. For us, the definition of energy security should change. All the institutions, ministries, this is the official energy strategy of the European Union, that with the structural deficit, we cannot conjure gas or oil. We don't have infinite sources. We need to transform, but think seriously about energy security so that whatever is happening now, and it will continue and will be truly exhaustive for economies, we need to prevent that situation to reoccur. That is why I believe that the future lies in electrification based on renewables. We need to redefine energy efficiency and all that makes energy security, that we consume less. The energy less affects our wallets, and that should happen in a debate in Poland, but also in the European Union. I do not see that on the level of the EU, or the United Nations, or any other international groups. That would be all from me as a starting point.
We will be back, especially on positivism for a techno-sustainable future, because it's something that TLF we are very interested in, also technology driving the sustainable transition, and we are truly believers of that. Now I move on to you, Katarzyna. As energy security deals with the security perspective of this topic, and as I said in the beginning, talking about geopolitics and the geopolitical weaponization of the energy sources has been a driving factor of the Russian strategy. And what is behind these strategies? If you can briefly go through this, and my personal opinion, my personal question would be how long this can be sustained by the Russian Federation and the Russian establishment, like how long they can use this as a weapon before member states, the EU, the US, and all the others will take some other steps.
Dziękuję.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. And I'd like to begin with arranging the picture. We have a tendency in Europe and in Poland to think about Russia, that Russia is using energy industry and energy resources as weapons. That is true. But what happened after the 24th of February is the explosion of economic war. That conflict had been truly heated up before. Now we have a full-scale economic war waging. It is not that the EU or the West is only defending. They are attacking, and it is a just attack. But to see the picture, we should understand that economic sanctions imposed on Russia are a form of using economic measures to achieve political goals, security goals, and Russia, in response, even though it did it before when everybody was so peaceful, Russia escalated its own use of energy resources for economic and war purposes. So we are at economic war, and that war, its effect, will enormously affect not just this coming winter only, but they will also affect the economic positioning of Europe, European Union, against the US, who are far less affected by this economic war as of today, against the Persian Gulf states, which benefit from it, against China and India that benefit from the situation, and that overall balance or current status quo of economic forces will transfer with high risks for the EU. That doesn't mean we are condemned to lose, but risks are high, stakes are high, higher than just raw materials, which are vital, and higher than winter, that is critical. What we have learned after several months of the war is that just asymmetry of political potentials between the EU and Russia will not guarantee victory, at least not in a short term. The EU has just paid from the beginning of war 100 billion euros to Russia for raw materials. What is happening? Those who paid, they finance the war. I'm not saying they couldn't do that. It's not that easy, but they co-finance the war, and they are not those who bear highest risks of Russia fighting with us. Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, and Poland brought greatest contributions, and the costs are incurred by the Baltic states, perhaps the Visegrad group states, also Germany. The reasons for the costs are varied, some just innocently, others because of bad policy so far. The question arises, what's the Russian strategy? Well, we need to understand its war strategy, not commercial one. It is not a strategy where Russia is calculating higher profits on energy resources, diversification of supplies. Russia wants to cause greatest harm or minimize its own harm, but increase the harm it causes to us. And simply speaking, we can fight with Russia using petrol, it fights against us using gas. Russia knows it's not easy to diversify gas supplies, while gas income is relatively low for Russia. We may diversify petrol resources, and Russia benefits most from petrol sales. So, what could be done? Two things to address. Primarily, if we are supposed to use petrol as a weapon, it needs to be effective. We are discussing prices, imposing limits on petrol prices, but the most effective tool that is overshadowed by the discussion is the petroleum transport, which in September itself, Russian petrol on the sea was transported by European companies and 60% insured by European EU companies. This is the mechanism where we can act, which is somehow ignored and not launched. If the EU decides to restrict Russian exports of petrol this way, plus price limits combined with that, there would be an opportunity for success. The experts are advocating that. Politicians cannot hear. Another issue I would name joint European action that builds trust. That's like a platform to ambassador here, and a question from me. Building trust and joint actions are enormously critical. If costs are different, resources are different in different countries of the EU, it is vital that all the countries, especially those most affected, do not feel that because they are poorer, like Bulgaria, they pay more, incur higher costs than Germany, that is richer, and it can secure its society by a larger cushion. The question comes of this German proposal of 200 billion euro support, internal support, in respect of compensation for society for the growing energy prices. The Germans can afford it, others cannot. The effect would be that some internal trust is distorted. To balance that, well, the Germans are not the only ones who play and rise distrust. In my opinion, our Prime Minister's speech in Spain was awful in terms of sustaining trust. Blaming Brussels elites and building internal European conflict, it only serves the Russians.
Thank you, Katarzyna. I want to pick up on this for going to the ambassador, Thomas. So recently, like a few days ago, on 12th of October, there was the meeting in Prague of the ministries of energy in Europe, and they wanted to, to check the price cap, if it's feasible, if it's not feasible. Well, it was not feasible because there is some opposition. So the EU is made of 27 member states, talking 24 languages, and we understand the usual process is going on once again. But indeed, you quote Germany, but in a different context, I would like to quote Germany because it has been for years for other European member states, the best practice in many fields, in production, in technology development. It's the biggest state and the biggest economy of the EU. Let's face it. What happened? What happened with energy? Can you tell us how did we get here? Because the complex situation, getting rid of nuclear was not maybe the best idea, but you couldn't foresee what could happen, what has happened now. So, what's going on, and what do you think can be the next step to also stick to what Kadri Simpson saying, acting together decisively and in solidarity? The appeal of Kadri Simpson, the energy commissioner in Prague. What can be done? And Germany can lead again, in my opinion, but how?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. And to follow up on my two previous speakers, I think from what Joanna said, interestingly, when you look at Germany, we always thought of ourselves as being ahead in in the energy transition, the energy transformation to renewables. And I'll come back to that in a second, how that happened and how we got to where we are. And now we find ourselves, as Katarzyna said, in a situation of full-blown economic war that has in store a very difficult winter and probably another very difficult winter in 2023 for all of us. And there's a lot of debate in Germany of how we got there and where we went wrong. But I think when you ask the question of why didn't the Germans see Russia's war coming against Ukraine, it has a lot to do with the way we look at our energy relationship. It was a mutual investment into willful interdependence, and few people could imagine in Germany that Putin would be as foolish to self-destruct his own business model, which he essentially did. And that will be a problem for Russia in the long term, but it's a problem for Germany and all of Europe in the short term. Why didn't we see that coming? Because we were relying too much on categories of economic rationality. We thought there is, how can you be so foolish as Russia as to destroy your own business model without having an alternative in place? But we failed to see that Putin was actually thinking in terms of historical greatness, historical mythology, categories that don't lend themselves to economic considerations. So that's how we got here, in my view. Now, there is, of course, a second strand to that. As I'm born in the 1960s, I grew up when the anti-nuclear movement in Germany became powerful in the early 1980s. Above all, energy security in Germany was above all about the dangers of nuclear technology. And after Chernobyl, there was no more nuclear power plant built in Germany. And if you ask me, I find it hard to believe that one will be built at any point in the future. It's sort of a societal consensus that it is a very dangerous technology. And that hasn't really, I don't see that has changed, even though we have a discussion now of whether we prolong the running time of those power plants that we still have. So then, most of what drove Germany's energy policy was climate considerations, which after a broad consensus to phase out nuclear, which was put into law in 1999, the next big thing was to get out of coal, because coal was the dirtiest of all other forms of electricity generation. So now there's a consensus basically to get out of coal by 2038, or maybe even a few years earlier, because we have to speed up what we need to do to prevent climate change. Well, you start to expand on renewables, but you realize that takes a lot of time for an industrial economy like Germany. So you need a bridge. And that bridge was supposed to be gas. And the gas was available, and the cheapest gas available on an economic rationality basis was Russian pipeline gas. There were even attempts to build liquefied natural gas stations in Germany, but they never got off the ground because you would have had to pay a security premium. You would have had to buy, as we will do now, LNG from the US and other places, and companies said, no, we don't need that, and the government sort of was not thinking about a security premium worth paying. And so now we have to build them in a hurry in order to get over the next winter, to diversify supply. But we haven't done that so far. And that is, I think, where Poland, which has always had a more sort of security, more of a geopolitical security prism on the energy question, was much smarter and did it much earlier, both with the LNG terminal in Świnoujście, but also with alternative routes like Baltic Pipe. So Poland also bought lots of fossil fuels in Russia up until this year, but it has prepared for other sources of supply, which the German government hasn't done in the past and now needs to do in a hurry. So that's one thing. That's sort of that's how we got where we are. Now I think we have a short-term problem, which is a problem of how do we get through this winter and the next, and we will need a diversification of supply. And that is why we talk to the Qataris, why we talk to the Norwegians, why we talk to the Americans, where I think the largest share of LNG will have to come from. We have, secondly, an issue of pricing. And the two, we can talk about that, but the two are sort of not well aligned, because if you want to impose a price cap to lower the price of energy, you run into potential supply security issues, and you have to square that circle in the months ahead, and that is what Katarzyna also referred to with this sort of, the German government has announced a big package to relieve some of the costs of rising energy prices to consumers and to industries. We're not the only country to do it. The number of our package is bigger because it's a bigger economy, it's a heavily industrialized economy, but I think it's quite clear that, and it needs sort of, you need to structure the package well so that it also has some incentives to save energy and not just to make it cheaper and continue to use it. But it is only part of the answer because it's not yet a European answer. And part of the price challenge is that we compete among European nations for scarce alternative sources of gas. And so the price rises further. And we're all losing from that, and our economies are all affected by that. And then we have the long-term challenge, which is how do we move quickly now? How do we use this crisis, which right now is a fossil fuel crisis, supply crisis? How do we use that to speed up the energy transition, indeed, into renewables? And so for the complex German government coalition of three parties, of which the Ministry of Economics and Climate is in the hands of the Green Party, they very much try to use this as a catalyst to actually speed up the transformation, to expand renewables dramatically, and use this sort of geopolitical wake-up call that we're going through, not just to repair mistakes of the past, but actually to use it as a catalyst for a better future.
Thank you so much. Now, I would like to put some questions. Maybe you have some follow-up, but I wrote some questions, but I would like also to give the opportunity to the audience to have questions. But I'll try to put them together. So, I mean, it's understandable that there are some divisions, that there are some different view perspective, that there are some countries that can afford some maneuver, and we are facing this because as an emergency, no? So we didn't expect the war. The war is barely predictable. And so it's an emergency, and that's why we talk about geopolitics, no, in general, and because you need a strategy in advance for facing situations like this. Now, the room, it seems everything is fine, but 1.5 years ago we would have been maybe online and with mask. Let's not forget, we had a pandemic a few months ago. And so from one crisis to another crisis, so, you know, we have the pandemic and health-related crisis, then the economic crisis that followed, then the geopolitical crisis of following the Russian invasion and aggression of Ukraine, and now the geopolitical energy crisis of energy stock that's not sufficient maybe to a smooth transition toward a sustainable economy, because renewables means investing in infrastructure. So reducing the impact in terms of CO2 takes time. It's not something immediate. And for you as a sociologist, maybe we have obliged different ways to wear masks. And now what are we doing? We are asking, member states are asking people to, you know, lower the thermostat. That's the solution for next week. The immediate solution can be that one. And maybe on more diplomatic level, how do you see the consequence of this thing? So there is a slowdown, there is something that has to be done on the society, and then there is something that has to be decided. We don't know who, we don't know how, but someone has to take a decision on this situation. Who wants to start? Maybe you?
I may try to give you the answer, but it's a different perception, because we have the situation. We made a good decision to cut off from Russian fuels. We didn't plan it last year. In Poland, there was this kind of line of thinking. Poland has done its homework. Speaking about coal, This is amazing for me. We've been speaking about increased dependence on import from Russia. People turned a blind eye and blind ear on that. It was not happening. We showed the data. It was shocking data. Some people said, not true, you are manipulating. And all of the stuff, then we discover we need to make the decision. That's the right one. I'm referring to gas in Germany and coal in Poland. Coal-based country allows to bring in 10 million tons of coal to be incinerated. We have polluted air, and the argument for it's cheap, it's local fuel, employment, and then we discover it's not true. How come is that possible that we were disillusioned like that? Energy lobbies are strong. We've got huge prices, and there are different reasons for that. Not only physical shortages, but speculations and manipulations in the market. If there is shortage of something, this is a natural phenomenon. People earn money on that. It's not like energy companies that are in a crisis. Quite the opposite. They are thriving the way they haven't seen for dozens of years. What we need to do, the government reacts to high prices. They subsidize consumption, which will further distort the price signal. Neither we introduce activities that reduce demand. We don't pay for reducing demand. And the second factor is the price. But we are trying to say that the price will not change. We decide that we'll pay from the budget, we subsidize. Many of these promises were not calculated, and suppliers may say, no, at this price we are not going to deliver this energy. We are not reducing demand. So we don't even know what is really the situation of the sector. We pay relatively low bills and we'll get new ones in spring, and this will aggravate. So we might have physical shortage of electricity, heat, and structural problems. And the energy market has been destroyed. It's not happening in Poland. It distorts everything. This energy market is not neoliberal capitalist idea designed to generate income. This is the system steering tool. You cannot store energy large scale, so we need to send out signals to deliver energy in short term and long term. We need energy market to control this, and this tend into crumble. So I've got a feeling that the situation is pretty difficult, the situation we are facing, and I'm afraid we are at the beginning of this journey. We are focusing on households. We are not thinking about business or industry in Poland. They are left to their own device. They have to reduce it on their own. It's interesting to see the gas demand decline in Poland. The industrial users use 60% less. We don't know why, but the general consumption of gas decreased by this. Even more in Finland. Finland was physically cut off. So understanding what are the reasons, it's interesting, because some of these activities have you rationalize. The energy that was excellently cheap becomes expensive, so I need to think when to switch the heater on, where I use electricity or not. We are able to save up on 20%, acting on low cost, but larger reductions might be the trigger of a deeper crisis, and some facilities being closed down, as it had been the case of Azoty, one of European Union's producers of fertilizers, the second largest user of gas in European Union. We are going to have problems because somebody is going to produce fertilizers. But understanding these dependencies is a challenge. What we are short of, what is the foundation, is limitation of electricity use. This is the only way to bring down prices. If we do not have the pressure, demand pressure, where you fight for every gigajoule, we are not going to bring prices down. And the consequences might be huge. Instead of looking for solutions, we focus on looking for people to blame. And who are to blame? There are different versions depending on the week or a month. Who is responsible for that? Let me repeat. In climate policy of the European Union, it is not a mistake. We do the right thing. What did we made a mistake? Our attitude towards gas and import from outside the European Union, because we haven't noticed that we run short of our own resources. We produce less coal. We have excavated coal for 150 years. There'll be no more of that. And gas, switching to that, should not be the foundation of our strategy, energy strategy.
Thank you. Of course, there are also, just let me add one sentence, there are always costly trade-offs in any transition. But when it happens during a crisis, it's very more complicated. But thank you for your insight. And costly trade-offs are also happening in terms of society. So I would like to pick up on that if you want to follow up.
Yes, the social and mental one is one of the most important elements of war. On the European side, this is where people choose these elites. They either choose the elites that are ready to embrace the energy transition, or they choose elites that promise everything to be elected, which will produce no solution, as we know. But for democracy, this might be pretty dangerous. I think that this is something, element of something bigger. European lifestyle was created and developed, nurtured with the provision that there will be no pandemics, no war at all. And everything was, as Ambassador said, around the idea that everybody follows the business model based on win-win solution. Everybody has got a rational way of thinking. Pandemics are in Africa, not in well-developed Europe. And thinking about pandemias was utopia, because humans are the same here and Africa. But thinking that wars in Europe, traditional wars in Europe, will no longer appear in Europe was very much wanted and justified, yet untrue. And as the consequence, a very good, comfortable way of life in Europe we all like has not foreseen that the most traditional war will return to the continent, and there might be pandemic, and top civilization is not able to protect you against viruses and pandemics. So we need to change the style. It will either change in a wild and uncontrolled way, which will mean huge changes, discrepancies between countries, social tensions, geopolitical tensions in the European Union, or it will be directed and controlled in a specific direction, that direction as described by Joanna Maćkowiak Pandera. we need to save up. So elites that are able to tell people in a constructive way, not that you live in a worse way, be happy, but we need to assume a different way. We need to live differently, which makes sense. This is triggered by the climate and limited resources. Our European style must be different. This is a necessity. If we are not able to transfer this information, create new story about European lifestyle, we are going to have Hobbes reality. I wish for nobody in Europe.
That was a very interesting topic. So,
Czy ja mogę tylko jedną rzecz?
Could I add something? Because saving, well, you need to split it into parts. I believe it may cause anxiety when households hear about savings. We are living in a sparing manner, but we speak of reducing the consumption of fossil fuels, and the highest potential is on the part of the industry. Half of the gas in Poland is consumed by industry. There is the potential to reduce the demand, flexibility. Obviously, households have something to do, but to a lower extent.
Yeah, let me be just provocative, because I agree that the industries, I mean, you cannot compare the consumption of the industry with our consumption of heating. That's clear. Did Europe face a green utopia then? Did Europe face a green utopia? That everything can go sustainable and green and no crisis will happen? And what is the solution? Like, who is gonna now take the lead to change, to the other side of the coin? Something happened already, so we're just, trying to fix it now. But who's gonna lead that process? Will be a nationalistic approach? Everyone deal like Italy did, better deal with the Gazprom, or for the first months, and then we will see. That's a solution.
Yeah, I don't have the solution. I just have two points I would like to make, because when you think about it as a political challenge, I think it makes sense to think about the short-term challenge and then the longer-term challenge. And the short-term challenge is that we face a difficult winter, not just on energy supplies and energy costs, but also economically. The latest forecast for Germany sees Germany for next year in negative growth territory, minus 0.4%, but it's a recession. So there is a slowdown. For every government, that is a pretty existential situation. And so organizing European solidarity at a moment of existential political challenge is quite difficult, because you think about your electorate at home. And the same Polish prime minister who is now criticizing German egoistic behavior for its gas subventions and package, it's the same Polish prime minister who in July and August said Germany cannot count on Polish solidarity because it had done everything wrong with Russia in the past. So, it is difficult to organize solidarity if you look at it as you pick and choose whenever you think it's the right thing to do. So, how do we go about it? Is there a way to indeed bring down prices through European action? Is there a way to leverage the EU's purchasing power if you combine it when you try to buy fuel on the global market? Those are the questions that are being discussed now, and we need to work through our differences rather urgently before this winter, before it divides us even further. And in that, I think you can compare it to the early months of the pandemic, when it was an existential situation for every government. You turn inwards. It's not easy to counter that impulse and turn to the European level. Now, the long-term problem is something Katarzyna alluded to early on. As long as we will buy gas from alternative sources, it will be LNG gas, and it will be more expensive than the gas American industries use and industries in other parts of the world. So there's also a longer-term challenge to our business model. And that we can, so either we, including in Germany, we will deindustrialize progressively because industries will go where energy is cheaper, or we move forward and we find a way to build a model of renewable energies in Europe with a full green transition that will become a model not just to keep our industries where they are, to transform their energy use, but to keep the productivity in our own economies, and then become a model for the rest of the world again. Others can afford longer to be supplied by their own fossil fuel industries, including the United States. Europe will not be able to afford that. And so it is a big question whether we can use this crisis also as an opportunity and speed up this transition. But to do both things at the same time, sort of to plug in the holes that that sort of Putin's decisions to go to war against Ukraine have produced, and speed up a much longer, much more complex, much more costly transition is very difficult. But that's the challenge. And I think, as Joanna said, I think the Commission is trying to do the right thing on that and trying to keep that project on the road, which is really important, and not to say this was only for good times, but now we have bad times, and now we go back to coal and to everyone saves himself.
Well, nonetheless, we have to trust someone. But now I would like, since we are going slowly to an end, and we will go, I think, going on this discussion for a long time, but I would like to ask if there is anyone from the audience that would like to, yes. Many. You can take mine. And please then, if I don't have my microphone, direct the question to the speaker if it's not a general. We can share. COVID is ended, so.
3 for 4 is microphone.
Dzień dobry. Good afternoon, Andrzej Holesiak. I'd like to address the word independency included in the title. This is vital. So far, we have looked at the map focusing on Europe, that is EU and Russia, but the global map is broader. On the one hand, it is good news. There is places to look for alternative sources of supply of gas and petrol. But when you look where the petrol and gas is, there are not many options, and plenty are not attractive, because we need to address regimes who are not far different from today's Russia. And we are trying to bring back to the market countries like Iran and Venezuela, countries we didn't want to speak not long ago. My question would be tricky, and it's a general question. But if my impression is that the EU wants to save the green transition, it paradoxically needs to invest into traditional energy sources, because transformation demands energy. So we need to refresh gas projects, those that were closed in Europe due to different reasons, because only that will guarantee short-term independence. Long-term horizons cannot be questioned, that the future lies in renewable energy. But the recent decision of OPEC Plus to cut down on petrol supplies to the market, that is the direction so much desired by Putin, proves that Europe can soon be blackmailed, drastically blackmailed. So, tricky question. Saving green transformation, doesn't it require short-term investment in traditional energy sources?
Maybe you want to pick this? Or just, yes, gather some questions, because, there's so many hands. Be concise, please. 20 seconds each, because we have only 8 minutes, 45, 44, 43.
Dzień dobry, Paweł Plewiński.
Paweł Plewiński,
Ja bym
good afternoon. I would like to ask a question, more technical question. Do we have, or are we going to have soon, mechanism to store green energy? Any mechanism that would be able to stabilize effectively between seasons of the year the energy we generate? If it's not feasible now, it's for the far future, 35 plus. Well, in such a case, this populistic and Russian-inspired decision of some EU countries to abandon atomic energy, which is pure and stable, wasn't premature. Well, a slight remark also on the market cooperation with Russia in terms of gas. It's not a secret that gas price on different market depends on the distance to Russia, big physical or political distance. If for several years we have known that some countries get different rates for gas, and the EU was unable to unify it within the joint market and joint procurement, wasn't that enough 20 years ago or 10 years ago to foresee that gas was political more than economic for Putin?
We'll pick a couple more. Be please brief because we have very few minutes.
Martyna Kotkiewicz. I'd like to refer to both questions. Broad perspective energy storage. When we speak of green transformation, aren't we blind to certain dependencies like on China in its role of producing photovoltaic panels or processing rare metals when we speak of storing energy?
Yeah. There is one last question or no? Yes.
Jakub Kapiszewski, Onet portal. Don't you feel that Europe is over-ambitious in looking for new energy sources? There was this initiative Desertec to build solar energy farms in North Africa. Now the British wants to do that. Perhaps it's good to get back to such extraordinary
Just
ideas.
one remark. The three questions. Basically, on independence. Independence doesn't mean protectionism. So to be independent doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with rivals. Now, Russia, no, but China is a rival, and technically we are very reliant on them. Technologically, we are very reliant. And with energy, it's the same. It's happening. It's a transition. That's the meaning of the word itself. Transition towards something, towards strategic independence, maybe. So who wants to start? To have 2 minutes each. You can start.
There are plenty of interesting questions. Should we invest in conventional sources, Andrzej? I don't think that's not the moment to invest in new sources. The investments will pay back in 30 years. Is it this direction we should opt for? Well, the grounds of our climate policy is not the ambition of leading the world in climate protection is important for our people, but at the grounds you will find the deficit of energy, raw materials. We do not have deposits of gas. Our coal and lignite resources are coming to an end. Nobody wants to build new mines, so we have to look for new methods. That's why I believe we in Poland should use coal power plants that we were supposed to shut down in 3-5 years. Perhaps we should extend their life a bit longer to consume less of gas, especially that we don't know how the strategy is going to work. But I don't think of building new infrastructure of huge power plants, long pipelines. Obviously, nuclear power plants are the topic. Then the balancing mechanism, that is a vast technical topic. Obviously, in a nutshell, there is a correlation between sun-generated and wind-generated energy. These are not continuous sources. As a rule, we generate solar energy in summer, wind in winter. Not always, of course. One solution will not give us energy security. We need stabilizing sources. Peak sources that we can launch when there is no wind, there is no sun. Energy storage will play the role, grids will act. We need to expand grids. That's the point. And to wrap it up, Yesterday I was in a debate in Brussels where somebody said we are confronted with bad options only. That's to your question on Chinese dependence. That's true. No time to expand, but we have to choose a path now to say what's going to happen in a year, 5 years, 10 years, and solve problems en route. Perhaps we should start, be more protectionist, and try to produce some things in Europe, and do not give that so easily to other countries. This is the model that thinks market will do everything. We know it won't. There is a risk that the situation that happened may recur. Tyrants have learned they can use such methods.
Go, and then Katarzyna gets the last word, I think. I only want to address one point, which is sort of somewhat broader, because you brought up the question of shouldn't we have seen the Russian political ploy of gas coming. And I will simply say that there's a big debate now in Germany. One debate is sort of looking backwards. Where did we go wrong? When was it obvious? When should it have been obvious? The problem is, in policies, you also have a lot of path dependency. This is a policy that worked during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. It worked for 20 years with Russia after the end of the Soviet Union, until it didn't work. And now, in hindsight, of course, you're much smarter and you say we should have seen it coming. The more interesting question is, what does this very difficult experience tell us about the future? And the German government is now in the process of drawing up its first ever China strategy. And this is not about energy in the first place, but it is about questions of dependence, vulnerability, and resilience. And if you decide that you have to pay a security premium for your independence to reduce your vulnerability, then that also means this is a minus in prosperity. And we will all have to pay it. Maybe in Germany more than others, because we thought this was no longer important after '89. That is our mental frame. We have to rethink. That is the core of what the Germans call die Zeitenwende, the turning point that was brought about Putin's war. Thank you.
I have to ask you to wrap up in 25 seconds.
To jest dokładnie
That's exactly the beginning of thinking of the new European model of life, where security and independence will require a cost. Perhaps not giving up luxury, not everybody has luxury, but the quality of life. I would also mention solidarity here. Solidarity between states and inside states, the Commonwealth, all together during the time where politics means war. But, in brief, it is not that when Russia split Europe using gas prices, it is still going on. There are two ways of supplies of gas to Europe, through Ukraine, and most of gas is transported through Ukraine, which many people do not know. The second way is through Turkey from the south, and we understand what that means, that the most loaded path goes through Ukraine. Will it go tomorrow? You may tell the story yourself. What will happen? That will not survive. They have no alternative gas supplies, but they take it from Ukrainian pipelines. Investing in gas, it is happening now. There has just been launched, long-delayed Greek-Bulgaria pipeline. There are investments in new LNG gas ports. Investing in gas is not always investing in deposits. It means investing in gas infrastructure. It is happening in Poland, in Germany, in Europe. It is a fact. The decision has been made. It is being implemented. And Rousseau's materials, it's the issue of 7 years, what is left, about 30%. China hasn't taken that yet. Germany is fighting, but I believe EU should fight for that. If not, we will face a true issue.
Thank you, everyone. I suggest we continue talking about energy storage solutions like hydrogen and other future technologies together, but not today because our timer is on 0000. Thank you once again to everyone, and yeah, hope to see you in other ELF Hubs event.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Thank you so much.
Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
At Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world.
Changing the world.
Changing the world
starts together
with us.